Hello and welcome to Politics. Today I am Farrukh Pitafi. Once again we are going to talk about the regional issues, particularly the US, Pakistan and Afghanistan, because as I pointed out yesterday, this is the week when a US Congress is holding hearings on Afghanistan, what went wrong and how things actually shaped up. We have seen how many of the US lawmakers were throwing tantrums. I'm sorry to say this, but this is how one felt, particularly Tom Cotton, Senator Tom Cotton even asked the Army Chief, Chairman Joint Chief of Staff Committee, why have you not resigned? But one aspect that was astounding was that more than 20 lawmakers, all of them Republicans, came up with a bill that has been tabled, that has been actually floated, asking for a review of this situation, and then also demanding that Afghan Taliban be sanctioned and the countries they accuse of being helpful be sanctioned as well. And naturally Pakistan is named as well, particularly regarding 20 years of review, what exactly happened in the last 20 years. To be honest, if you go through the cigar reports, Special Inspector General on Afghan reconstruction, you have all the answers what went wrong. It was basically corruption that brought the Afghan government down, not Pakistan, not any other country. But that is the way things are. And then it was assumed in Pakistan that maybe it is going to actually snowball into something else. We saw statements coming from federal ministers, various influencers. So we are going to talk about that as well. And just to underscore the fact that Pakistan, apart from Afghanistan, is perhaps the only country that has sacrificed too much, and one has to actually appreciate that as well. We are going to discuss all these matters. I'm going to introduce the panelists as well. But before that, there is a package for you to watch. Let's watch it.
They say history repeats itself. Big powers, when faced with difficulties, try to shift the blame and look for scapegoats. That is exactly what happened in the United States congressional hearing, where American politicians did what Prime Minister Imran Khan opined in his recent Washington Post article, that is to make Pakistan a scapegoat for American failure in Afghanistan. He was surprised that no mention was made of the sacrifices that our country made for the sake of countering terrorism in the region. He argued that since 2001, Imran Khan had been stating that Afghanistan needed a political solution rather than a military solution, which the United States completely ignored until the Doha peace agreement. And in the end, it was the political solution which ended the conflict rather than a military victory for either side. Ever since 9/11, Pakistan has agreed to every demand the United States has made and helped it in all its ventures in the South Asian region. However, the United States has always abandoned Pakistan and held it responsible for all their failures. 2 days after this opinion piece was published, 22 senators moved a bill in the United States Senate that seeks to assess Pakistan's alleged role in Afghanistan before and after the fall of Kabul and in the Taliban offensive in Panjshir Valley. Senator Jim Risch, ranking member of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee, and other Republicans introduced the Afghanistan Counterterrorism Oversight and Accountability Act in the Senate to address outstanding issues related to the Biden administration's rushed and disastrous withdrawal from Afghanistan. Reacting to this development, Federal Human Rights Minister Shiri Mazari said that Pakistan will once again be made to pay a heavy price for being an ally of the US in the war on terror. It is time for the United States to recognize Pakistan's efforts for peace in the region and the global war against terrorism. But unfortunately, US lawmakers seem to be scapegoating Pakistan to hide their own mistakes. It's about time Western powers, especially United States, should accept their mistakes and stop shifting the blame on Pakistan.
Right. This package starts by reminding you that they say history repeats itself. I think it reminded me of Karl Marx, who had said that history first repeats itself as a tragedy and then as a farce. We don't know which cycle is this one, but we have been here. And usually whenever Pakistan helps its Western allies. In the end, we are the ones who are usually blamed for everything. But let me introduce the panelists. I've got one guest who's in the studio, Barrister Dr. Muhammad Ali Khan Saif Saab, who's a senior analyst, a veteran politician, a lawmaker, and apart from everything else, triple PhD. Thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Then I'm joined by my good friend, senior journalist Faz Rahman Saab, who's a senior political analyst based in Washington, D.C. Faz Rahman Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. And for the first time, joining me, Professor Faizan Haq, who's Chairman, Advisory Council, American Pakistani Public Affairs Committee. Thank you very much, Professor Saab, for being part of the program as well. Before I actually go to discussion, let me remind you how the Foreign Office of Pakistan has reacted to the reports about the bill. First of all, it goes on to say, completely unwarranted reference to Pakistan are included in the US Senate bill. Foreign Office spokesman. All references are inconsistent with the spirit of Pakistan-US cooperation since 2001. Only way to achieve long-term sustainable peace in Afghanistan is through dialogue. Such legislative measures are uncalled for and counterproductive. So these are the statements. This is the reaction of the Foreign Office. Let me start with Barrister Saab. Barrister Saab, we have been here, deja vu. But do you think that the fact that there are only Republican lawmakers, although some of them are very high profile, this might not actually become a law?
Well, insofar as the lawmaking process is concerned, of course, you need to pass it through the Congress and have to, get majority for this to support this bill. So that's going to take some time, and I'm sure that this probably will just be put in a drawer, because there is no logic in this in the kind of attempted lawmaking that they are attempting to do. In the sense that, in my opinion, it's just nothing. It's just a political statement, which is a manifestation of the frustration and the anxieties of the United States, in a sense that
United States or Republican Party?
Republicans, yeah.
They say every time we start cooperation, and you end up handing over victories to the Democrats.
Exactly, they end up like that, but that's their own history. And I was yesterday when I heard about this bill, I was thinking that these lawmakers must read the history of Afghanistan since 2001 at least, if not too far in the past. It was their decision. It was a Republican president who decided to invade Afghanistan. He came to Afghanistan along with his allies and ended up in a mess. And then they ran away, packed up and ran away. So they must man up, I believe. And they should take responsibility, take their, accept.
Own it up.
Accept, yes, own it, and accept the fact that they committed mistakes and rather blunders. And then they had to leave Afghanistan in a mess and run away. And they had even problems evacuating their own people. If Taliban had not cooperated with them, their people would have been still languishing in Afghanistan.
Regardless of what Taliban did or did not do, Pakistan kept on cooperating from get-go, right? Let me bring in Faz Rahman Saab. Faz Rahman Saab, the fact that a senior politician like Mitt Romney has also supported this bill, should it not tell us that at least when it comes to the Republican side, Pakistan might be losing influence with them, or at least failing to convey Pakistan's own point of view to them?
Thank you, Pitafi Sahab. It's good to be on your show again. Thank you for the opportunity. Well, let's just start with what you basically said. That I think also Lester Saab made this reference. This ain't going anywhere. I mean, this is just simple politics. And let me also say this is not about Pakistan actually per se. This is more about local politics against the Democrats, against the Biden administration, because they don't want to leave any opportunity to attack and to malign the Biden administration. The Republicans parties, I mean, I think there was this famous quote from one of the former speakers of U.S. Congress, Tip O'Neill, back in the 80s. He said, all politics is local. So what happened in and what's happening in Congress, on the Senate side, in the hearings, is basically just local politics. Their sole aim, Republicans' sole aim, is to make sure that they regain the control of Congress, of both houses actually, Senate as well as the House of Representatives, and of course maybe bring in Trump again, or if not Trump himself, somebody like him. So
Right.
we have
Faisal, sorry to cut you, but Faisal, given the kind of numbers that we have seen coming from the pollsters, one would think that the decision to actually call it a day in Afghanistan was quite popular with Afghan people, American people. But despite that, there seems to be a lot of anger coming from lawmakers. And I'm not merely talking about one side, I'm talking about both sides. Why would that be? Are the lawmakers, US lawmakers, disconnected from public sentiment, sir?
So basically, there are two sides to this question. Great question. So you're talking about withdrawal and then the execution of that strategy, of that plan. Nobody questions the withdrawal. They say yes, it was about time that U.S. should have come back, and even the general, they say, okay, yes, come back, but leave a few there, like at least 2,500 or so, just to make sure that we maintain the order. The idea to withdraw was never a question here. It was a Republican, as Ambassador Saab just said, it was a Republican president who went in there. And actually, it was a Republican president, Trump himself, who got the ball rolling, by signing his Secretary of State went all the way to Doha, and in presence of, Ghani brother, Mr. Zalmi Khalizad and brother, they both signed that contract, the agreement between the two parties. So it was the Republican president, not the Biden administration. Biden only continued, rather gave them a little bit more time. Trump wanted to end this by May 1st. So actually, Biden extended the deadline.
No, sir,
So
I get that, Faisal, I get that, but if you have seen yesterday's hearing, it didn't seem to be about the way they actually withdrew. They actually were debating the idea of withdrawing totally or leaving some soldiers on ground. And we are going to actually talk about that. We have a lot of time. Allow me to bring in the third guest, Professor Faizan Haq, and let me ask him. So what do you make of this bill, and how the Republicans seem to be reacting to the whole thing, especially Mitt Romney?
Assalamu alaikum. Thank you so much for having me on your program. As it has been said earlier, that it is mostly for local consumption and scoring point against the Biden administration. That is the real intentions. However, having 22 representatives go and sign on to this bill and building up pressure, especially the pressure that we call the public and private pressure on the Biden administration, actually underscores something else. That is that, you see, what Americans do are what Americans gonna do. But what about the Pakistanis, what they have been doing, which is actually a crucial question that we should be asking, that how come if we had a 20 years of engagement of opportunity and the Pakistani narrative is still not being sold on the at the Hill, that means at the Congress and senatorial level in the United States of America? It is a very important question for us to ask, because 20 years of engagement with an ally, and that ally doesn't have a narrative or does not even include you in your narrative, that is a question we should be asking from our leadership who has been in power at that time, that what were they doing? Now, Walt Whitman, he said, oh life, oh me, of these questions reoccurring. And these questions keep reoccurring, that what the American role has been in South Asia and what Pakistan's response to that, that role is going to be. The Afghanistan issue is not an old issue. I think for the first time we see there's some sensible response, a coherent response, even if it is not correct or wrong, that is something else. A coherent response is coming from Pakistan. It may be a little too late,
Right.
but finally we are getting that
Professor
sync
Huck,
message.
let me ask you, because you said that we have to hold our own leadership accountable for the past 20 years of wasted opportunity. It brings to my mind an episode back in People's Party's time. I'm talking about 2009, I think, when Pakistani government actually tried to carry out one supplement in Western papers showing how much Pakistan had lost in the war on terror, and it was declined. So Pakistan has been trying, but there doesn't seem to be that kind of reception. You can tell somebody who's listening, if you're not, the other side doesn't want to listen, what are you going to do?
I understand what you're saying, but you see, there are more than one ways to push the narrative. America is a very, very open society, and I think a comprehensive effort, a very strategic effort has not been made, and I think probably my dear brother here, Faiz Rahman, is far more expert in creating a narrative or pushing the narrative because his background is journalism, and he can probably attest to it. We have spoken about this many times, and how come our narrative is not being told. So basically, the narrative is not only, giving here and there some op-eds. It's a comprehensive effort that starts from op-eds, advertisement, but making an effort to reaching out to all the opinion makers, including journalists and the lawmakers. And as it has been said earlier by my dear friend, that everything is local. And I'm sure that Republicans going to get political mileage out of this, and that Democrats going to be in the defensive. But Biden's President Biden's decision was because he wanted to deal with it in the earlier part of his presidency, so it doesn't linger on. Because now we have 2-3 years
That's
to
a
recover.
very good point, sir. Because you actually brought up the issue of Pakistan's narrative, and you actually said that our political class, our leadership had actually failed. Let me actually come back to the studio. I have a barrister who has been a lawmaker throughout this time. Let me ask him, with your vantage point, do tell us where we went wrong.
Well, I don't think that we went wrong at any stage. We cooperated with the international community after 9/11 because there was a UN Security Council's resolution, and under the international law, we were supposed to follow it and respect it and make sure that we offer our, whatever services we could. So we did that, and I'm sure that the American administration is fully aware of that fact.
Right.
Number two, Pentagon is very clear on about the support that Pakistan Army provided in keeping Pakistani borders intact, and played its role in the war on terror.
No, I get that, and the point that Professor Huck is actually making is not about sacrificing or doing the right thing. It is about actually telling your story to the West. And America is an open society. I can understand that India might have too much influence, clout, money, but still, I mean, you can actually sell your point of view.
I was coming to that, but I was trying to, present the context in which I was going to make my argument. So this is what we have done, and everybody in the West knows. The US administration knows it, the Pentagon knows it, US Army is fully aware of it, and successive US presidents were interacting with Pakistani governments at all levels. So there's no doubt in their mind. But what you're seeing, these complaints and this accusation of not doing what we were supposed to do is basically a political statement, and you cannot expect, and you should not be expecting the US politicians to say that, oh, we are happy with Pakistan did its best and we are satisfied with it. They will always be accusing you, because that's the ground reality is that it's their own failure, and their own failure has to be justified somehow to the American public. And Mr. Faiz Rahman is absolutely correct in pointing out the fact that it's all internal politics. politics, US internal politics.
Right.
But as far as Professor Faizan Saab's comment is concerned, yes, I know that these statements are emanating from the from Washington and from US government that Pakistan didn't do its role, didn't play its role. And also yesterday in the bill there was an accusation that we probably provided sanctuary to the Taliban, to Taliban leadership, and why did we release them and things like that. I think it's just shooting yourself in the foot with your own pistol. It's what you did, and we did with all understanding and in agreement with one another. And now you have very conveniently forgotten all that we were supposed to do. And you have even very conveniently forgotten your own Doha agreement, in which you sat with those people and you actually signed and acknowledged their presence and their legal status. So now blaming Pakistan, no matter what Pakistan does, we sacrificed 80,000 people lives,
$150 billion.
Yeah, $1 billion in you know, losses and financial losses, but still we will always be blamed because it is their politics and their political convenience demands that they accuse Pakistan for their own failures.
Right. We have to take a break. When we come back, I'm going to go back to Fazl Rahman Saab and ask him about his experience regarding Pakistan's narrative, because it is very important. But first, let's take a break.
Book is life. Book is hope. And book is light for the future.
Seek the wisdom that will untie your knot. Seek the path that demands your whole being.
Welcome back. Before going to the break, we were taking stock of Pakistan's ability or inability for the past 20 years to actually convey its point of view to the rest of the world, and that is very important. Faz Saab, I'm coming back to you, sir. You have been reporting on these matters. Let me ask you about your experience, because it seems that we keep on blaming Pakistan's inability to communicate. But there seems to be a lot happening in this region, particularly what India is doing to its own people. But hardly ever it is published in the West, hardly ever it is debated in the US Congress. I remember when India actually went for August 5, recolonization of Kashmir. At that time, there were hearings, but Republicans actually walked out of those hearings. Your take, sir? So you'll have to unmute your mic.
Yes.
Yes, sir.
Okay.
Now I can hear you. Please
you.
go. Yes, sir.
Yes, thank you. Okay. So it's a very multi-faceted. There's several aspects to it. Let me make two
So, Faisab, I'll have to stop here for a second. There seems to be some audio problem. I'm going to come back to you till the time you are actually done fixing the issue. Let me come back to you. But Professor Faizan Hassam, regarding how India is received in the US, among the US lawmakers, how Kashmir was covered. I understand that there was relatively better coverage 2 years ago when India went ahead with the draconian measures. But after that, the problem is that somehow Republicans seem to be under a growing sway of India. That's why they seem to be that hostile towards Pakistan. What is your view on this, sir?
So actually, in back to saying what I think we're having the same problem here. Sorry, am I right?
Yeah, but I can hear you. Go ahead, sir, please.
So what we are seeing is that had the theme of today's Pakistan, I want to bring two pictures to contrast to compare. One is that when Trump in the when he joined the and we see about 2014 Pakistan was 12.
Right, Professor, sorry to cut you. There seems to be some network saturation issue here. Let us first try to fix it, because I initially thought that I can hear you, but then the sound started breaking. Until MCR actually looks into this matter, let me come back to the studio. Barrister Saab.
Well, I think Pitafi Saab, India is at the moment the blue-eyed boy for United States of America.
Why?
For one reason, for one basic reason, and I think it's very clear and obvious to everybody who just is interested in international relations, and that is
containing China.
Yes, containing China in this region. They have no other partner whom they think is suitable enough or good enough to support them in this game. Pakistan has.
But if India is that important, why not make it part of AUKUS? They didn't. Quad became a secondary issue. It has become a diplomatic forum now.
Exactly, but that is probably the use and abuse methodology in international politics.
Okay.
They would do what is in their interest. I mean, in the interest of United States, not in the interest of India. Even being getting cozy towards India is also at the moment in the interest of United States.
Yeah, but my humble submission was that the sheer volume of abuses under Narendra Modi's government are such that nobody can stop reacting.
Even if you multiply the amount of abuses that are being committed against religious minorities and against all sorts of Indian nationals,
and then Kashmiris
across, yes, exactly, and that's even regional areas, like even what has happened. Just ignore Kashmir, forget about Kashmir. Let's look at what happened in Assam just a few days ago. I mean, Kashmir is one of the burning points, but it is very conveniently ignored for the sake of international interests. Number one. Number two. Human rights has always been, the issue of human rights has always been used by global powers in pursuing their own foreign policy agendas. It was never politically neutral or a political issue. So even if you look at the genesis of the jurisprudence of human rights, it's all political. It's all related to international political realities and international political dimension, and you cannot isolate human rights from politics. Number one.
Right.
So therefore, India will never be criticized. India will never be asked to improve its human rights record or treatment of its minorities, and Kashmir is self-determination. Nothing will happen
I get what you're saying. My humble submission is that when you look at nuances of how it is being debated, you will find a component within Democratic Party, even Indian expatriates, right? They have taken up this issue. But Republicans seem to be totally divorced from this fact. In fact, Donald Trump was in New Delhi when that bloodbath was going on, when where Muslims were being killed. What is going on with the Republicans at this moment?
Well, again, the history of Republican Party and then the kind of people who are supporting a Republican point of view, they have always been these conservatives, orthodox, WASPs, you know, the WASP Americans, right? That I don't want to get into that, but it's their history, and it's how America is being has been politically polarized in between Republicans and Democrats. It's the liberals and it's the conservatives, and I think Republicans are still carrying that heritage. And
for a long time, conservatives used to be Pakistan's closest allies.
Yes, in the beginning.
President Reagan, first Bush, second Bush even, right?
Exactly. That was for the reason that.
And later on, even Donald Trump started praising.
Yeah, because they needed Pakistan. During President Reagan's period, it was Afghanistan. During Bush's time, it was again Pakistan. It's it's political realities, as I said in the beginning, that it's just political hardcore realities and hardcore politics that.
Right. Let me ask the MCR if our guests from the US are with us. Right. Faz Rahman Sahab, can you hear us?
I can hear you well.
Right, I can hear you as well. Now, let me bring the same question back to you. Pakistan's narrative not being received the way it should be. And it seems that somehow the narrative has been said that whatever goes wrong in Afghanistan is down to Pakistan. Why is it that we haven't been able to rebut this cliche, which is also wrong?
Okay, so let me make three distinct points here. First, you know, a friend of mine, a dear friend of mine actually, Dr. Malia Lodhi, when she was ambassador here in Washington, and she made a public actually comment about Pakistan. And she said, and it's very meaningful, she said, first, Pakistan is a Muslim country and Pakistan is a nuclear power. And now I'm going back to your point, what you said about India being a blue-eyed boy. India is not necessarily a blue-eyed boy. On the other hand, Pakistan's been treated as a stepchild, and because of the context I just gave you. So this is not exactly about India, this is about Pakistan and Pakistan's distinct identity, Pakistan's geopolitical situation, Pakistan's religious and, you know, the military, everything, you know, the whole context. So that plays into a lot of people's hands here in Washington who don't necessarily see Pakistan in that light, in that positive light. On the other hand, if you look at Pakistan, to be fair, you know, I've been very critical of Pakistan's policies, especially, you know, the government's policies and their actually executions. But to be fair with them, Pakistan's narrative has been like a locomotive on the track, on the right track. This is my feeling, that Pakistan has done everything right in coming up with a good, solid, cohesive narrative, which is on a good track, a locomotive that is strong. But mind you, in the West, especially in Washington, there are other locomotives as well on the track coming from the opposite directions. And I'm talking about different lobbies who are here to oppose Pakistan in every step of the way because of, again, quote unquote, our distinct identity. So we have to keep that in mind. Number 3 point, I said, yes, we've been cohesive, but I think recently, see, the narrative for Afghanistan's failure, and to be fair with the Americans, they do admit their mistakes. The general himself called this a strategic failure, you know, in Congress in the hearing. And Biden administration, yes, it was catastrophic. So they do admit their mistakes. Yes, they know that it could have been done a lot better. The narrative here is we stayed in Afghanistan for 20 years because of Pakistan's help. And we lost to the enemy that we dislodged 20 years ago because of Pakistan. Okay, so you have to understand that. So this is their narrative. Okay, what we are trying to do here, and that's a mistake in my opinion, we're actually reaffirming that narrative. Our
How?
foreign minister was here in New York and he was going around and basically, literally lobbying the Taliban. So when you see statements, and Prime Minister also, he made this speech, was a reference to that. So when Pakistan is totally trying to justify a takeover, which is seen in Washington as a as a happening which happened because of Pakistan.
Right.
So you basically reinforcing
That is a very interesting argument to make. But with due respect, today I was looking at a report that was presented by one of the best journalists we have known, Clarissa Ward. She was in Kabul, and her argument was the same that the foreign minister was making. Avoid humanitarian crisis in Afghanistan. If that is going to actually become a thing, it can create really bad repercussions for the region. It might not have anything to do with the Afghan Taliban's love or support. The fact is that the Afghan people are suffering at this moment, and that is a case that needed to be made. Let me actually go back to Professor Faizan Haq. Professor Sab, earlier you were talking and then we had communication problem. If you want to actually finish that thought, please go ahead.
Yeah, I wanted to say that such a huge crisis on the border of Pakistan, and we had a disastrous, departure of America from that region. But as a result, in America, we see there is a joint hearing, and the people are brought to the task, and the question and answers have taken place. My question is that why has not that taken place in Pakistan? Because it is equally disastrous, if not it's more, because they are our neighbors and it affects us directly. What I want to bring to you, is the core strength of American system that keeps it vibrant and keeps it as a superpower, and that is the self-correction, the humility to self-correct and discuss things openly. And as Rama Iqbal has said that Surat-e Shamsheer hai, daste qaza mein qaum, karti hai jo apne har lamhe apne amal ka hisab. So the thing is that we have to see what we hear from Pakistani quarters is we have made no mistakes. Our narrative was right. There was no problem with it. The problem is on the other side. On the contrary, what I wanted to bring to get the narrative out of President Musharraf's leadership, and then we see now recently it happened, but and was getting hit left effort on the part of the governments to get the narrative going and moving forward. So this is the point that I wanted to make. Thank you.
Right. In the end, your voice again was breaking, but I could actually, make out this much that you were pointing out. One, Pakistan should also have accountability process as rigorous as the US, and that is a good point. It should be made as much as possible. The second thing that you actually said was that we keep on saying that the other side is not ready to listen, and probably we don't see whether we are actually communicating the right kind of narrative or not. That is a good point too. Now the question is, it seems that every country which has a medium power or some kind of influence has a lobby in Washington. Why is it that Pakistan, Professor Saab, doesn't have any lobby at all? And it seems that Iran, which is, far more sanctioned and in trouble, also has a lobby. People speak for it. Similarly, Afghanistan, their diaspora have a voice. why is it that Pakistan has not been able to come up with or work on a lobby?
Sir, actually, I would say Pakistanis do have lobbies. They do a lot of work. I tell you, things will be a whole lot worse if it would not be for the American Pakistanis who make that effort. The organization I'm part of and many other organizations, they work very hard to do this. But we can do only this much. It has to come from the people and the elected officials of Pakistan to come forward and put a strategy together. And many times in the past, we have seen Pakistanis have done a wonderful job. People were giving examples of Pakistan's lobbying efforts and how successful they were. But the problem is that we have not been consistent. So it is not that it is not possible.
No, my question, sorry to cut you, Professor Saab, my question was not, I'm not actually questioning how the Pakistani diaspora works. My question was that if there is a lobby, and there must be, you have made that point, what needs to be there to empower that lobby, that it has more punching power, more capacity to influence?
Actually, it is coordination of and knowing the facts and having transparency about the policies, because everybody who makes an effort on lobbying, they do in a very segmented way. So there is a comprehensive thought process is missing. That creates a segmented narrative. And when there are gaps in narrative, the other people get into those gaps and they play it against you. That is what is required.
That's a very good point. Before I come back to the studio for the final conclusion, let me ask Faiz Rahman Sahab if he wants to add to what was said about lobbying efforts.
So basically, lobbying doesn't happen overnight. Yes, of course, you can hire a lobbyist for certain $1 million and just ask them to place certain op-eds here and there, arrange some meetings. That's okay. But if you look at the lobbies that have been effective, it has taken them a long, long time. For example, let's just go back to our immediate competitor here, which is the Indian lobby, right? So Indian lobby is not about just a few highly paid lobbyists on K Street in Washington. It's about their strategic placements in the media, in think tanks, in the academia, in politics, in rural towns of the U.S. And it has taken some time, not just like 20 years, 30 years, rather longer. So Pakistanis have to come together, number one. And then again, to my friend's Fazan's point, there has to be some consistency. Let me just, make a shameless plug here for myself. In 2004, I led an effort to establish Pakistan caucus in U.S. Congress. 2004, I was director of that caucus. President Musharraf came on September 22nd, 2004 to inaugurate that caucus on the Hill, on the Capitol Hill. As soon as, certain people left that effort, the whole thing kind of fell apart. We had 75 members of Congress signed to that caucus.
That's a great point. Unfortunately, the internet is doing its own thing once again. And secondly, we have run almost out of time. So I bring the discussion back to you for a few liner conclusions, sir, and then we are going to conclude because we have.
Well, I am sure that we must take stock of our actions. There is no doubt about this. Accountability and self-accountability is very important. But problem with Pakistan at the moment is that we have a very serious crisis right at our western border, and we have to live with that crisis. The US has withdrawn. It is not going to live with it. We are going to live with it. So if the foreign minister was in New York and he was constantly talking about Afghanistan and was asking and literally requesting countries to not to stop supporting Afghanistan, I believe look at it from a different angle, and that is that he was probably not asking for supporting Taliban, they was asking for supporting the Afghan people. Because if there's stability and no vacuum, and Afghan people are receiving what they need, emergency aid and all that, then at least the crisis could be averted to an extent. So I believe that it's just a challenging situation, and We are trying our best.
Yeah, there are a million things can go wrong in Afghanistan, and it is sad to see them one by one going wrong. I'm told that we have to conclude the program here. Barrister Muhammad Ali Saif Saab, thank you very much, sir, for being part of the program. Faz Rahman Saab, this last bit about Pakistani caucus was very fascinating. Next time you come to the program, I will request you to start with this. Thank you very much for your precious time. Professor Faizan Hassam, thank you very much, sir, for being part of this discussion as well. As you have listened to our participants, there are two things that are very important. One, this idea that Pakistan actually comes under criticism because Pakistan is what Pakistan is, that it is a Muslim nuclear state. That might be there, but it actually takes me back to, a very interesting book that was once very popular, Clash of Civilizations. The framing, it seems, was inhaled more by the Republicans, and that should worry everybody because, I mean, when that book was written, when that idea was floated, it was imagination, wild imagination of someone. It should not be something that is set in stone. Pakistan keeps on renewing itself and tries to make sure that people see how much we have sacrificed. It is important right now to pay heed to what Pakistan is saying, because as I pointed out earlier, history can repeat itself as a tragedy or as a farce. And God forbid, if more farces are repeated in this region, that will really lead to some kind of catastrophe. This was today's program. Thank you very much for watching. Take care.